Hello and welcome to a very special CFO Playbook podcast here from the London Stock Exchange. I'm David McClelland, and today we're joined by a room full of experts, economists and business leaders from across the UK to dissect the Chancellor of the Exchequer's Spring 2024 budget. Joining us on our expert panel are Chief Economist from Saltmarsh Economics, David Owen, MD from Lucky Saint, Emma Heel, the Editor-in-Chief and founder of Earle Wellbeing, Earle MBE, and CEO of Soldo, Carlo Gualandri.
This episode of the CFO Playbook is brought to you by Soldo. Thousands of businesses from small to large corporations, including Mercedes-Benz, Sony, and Get Your Guide, use Soldo to make their business spending simple and efficient. To find out more or to book a demo, visit soldo.com.
Let's kick off with productivity. You mentioned the press's take on some of the economic context in which we find ourselves right now. Well, a headline from yesterday's City AM reads, UK economy nearly a third smaller thanks to catastrophically bad productivity slowdown. Now, it's not just the press that are saying that, and the direction of travel for productivity in the UK has been, pretty clear for 15 or 16 years now since the financial crisis. Is it that long ago? The Resolution Foundation finds that 0.4% productivity, the UK is less than half the rate of the 25 richest OECD countries. Why? Well, LSE report says UK productivity lower than France, Germany, United States, and almost all of this gap is due to a lack of investment in capital and skills. So, my first question, and Emma, I'll come to you first of all. Have you seen anything, picked up anything from the recent budget? And let's cast our mind back to November as well, because as David said, how much has really changed since then, that you think will help you to enact some change, either within your business or broadly amongst your peers, when it comes to productivity. What have you seen that might enable us to stop this productivity dip and actually enable growth through productivity?
Thanks for having me. Obviously, we work in alcohol-free, and alcohol-free is having an absolute storming time at the moment, and we've enjoyed triple-digit growth year on year on year since we started. But I think it's probably worth explaining that I also represent the small businesses in the hospitality sector. So I'm actually the chair of a group called the FBI, Family Business and Independence. They changed it from SME because obviously FBI is way sexier. The hospitality P&L is pretty broken. Obviously, they've been impacted hugely by antiquated business rates, cost of food and drink going up, wage increase, and obviously there's going to be another minimum wage increase in April. And we've got a wonderful group that meets a couple of times a year that feeds into the Hospitality Sector Council. And we're talking, I've got a guy that owns a fish and chip shop in the north of England, someone that owns a cafe, someone who's a Michelin star chef. We've got someone with a gastropub in Cotswold. And it's really tough. And I think one of the areas of the budget that was great was to see the VAT threshold increased, but it just increased from £85,000 a year to 90. So that's great for micro businesses, and that ensures that 28,000 businesses over the UK are VAT exempt. But if we were to look at the real term increase that it should have gotten to, if we'd have taken into account inflation, really it should be up at 110,000, because all the cost impacts on the PLL are still there. We just put a pack together for the Chancellor for the spring budget, and I had to really force some of the people that appear on our small and family business council to share their P&L. One guy shared with me a P&L he's never shown anyone. They've been trading for 40 years, they've made a profit for 40 years, and the last 2 years they haven't. And there needs to be some form of fiscal intervention to help hospitality. It's pretty tough out there for them.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure in some audiences, hospitality rich, there'll be a big round of applause for that that statement. Not that I'm trying to induce a round of applause here or anything, but I'm sure many people in hospitality in particular would agree with you. Liz, I'll put the same question to you from where you sit. Obviously, an entrepreneur of many years, you've seen cycles, you've sold businesses in the past, and you've started new ones in the wake. What are you seeing at the moment to encourage you that there are some opportunities for growth to try and break this cycle? Or is your experience of growth maybe different because of how you have oriented your business and your ventures?
Well, I think that's very interesting. And actually, I was really interested to hear what you were saying, Emma, about the small family-run businesses, because I think we have to remember when we look at business as a whole, we're often talking, as David does, about these huge organisations. But, big oaks from tiny acorns grow. And if I look back on my career and journey as an entrepreneur, starting the beauty company, for example, we started as a team of 2 across a kitchen table, tiny, micro business. And we grew it into what became one of Britain's largest, if not the largest, independent beauty brand before it was sold. So we have to really encourage and foster those tiny businesses. And for me, I think the 2 things that really stood out, apart from the slight increase in VAT threshold, which is useful for freelancers, for small businesses, for self-employed. I have a publishing company now, and we work with a lot of freelance staff, a lot of consultants. So these differences do make a difference. The NIC definitely makes a difference for employers and for those who are self-employed. So I was really heartened to see that threshold changed. And also actually something that was slightly buried but really struck me as being a good thing was the removal of the threat to interfere with angel investment. Yeah. Because that is how small businesses get off the ground and how they grow. And the thought that you would potentially cap that and frustrate that, I mean, that's just mind-bendingly stupid, in my opinion, humble opinion. So I'm glad that didn't happen. And I think, we need to encourage more investment. So that's hopefully a good sign that businesses will be supported and, particularly from these small ones who can then grow and flourish. And overall, I was slightly encouraged, but obviously there can always be more, can't there?
Indeed. Carlo, we'll come to you next. We haven't heard from you yet today. As the CEO of Soldo, thank you very much for inviting us all here today. Soldo, a company that is very much on a growth journey at the moment. What are you seeing in terms of productivity, in terms of opportunities to continue the growth curve that you're hoping to go on, and maybe what some of the barriers to that might be?
Well, if you want to look at the broader scenario, I would cast my vote and then I connect it to my own experience within this company, but in the broader market, to one single thing, and that is the skill set, the training, the level of how you the level of your toolkit in addressing an increasingly complex market. It's just the fact that the world is becoming more complex every day, literally every day. And if you don't have the tools to address this in many ways, as a business owner, in taking the right decisions, just think of it, how many businesses end up failing just because they cannot understand cash flow. What the hell is cash flow? It used to be into my drawer there were or not money at the end of the day. Now, sorry, not anymore. You have to be able to think in terms that up until yesterday were sort of reserved to big things, big entities, big enterprises. If you're a small business, you don't do budgeting, you don't do forecasting, you cannot manage your cash flow, you don't have a policy for growing your talent. Yes, a lot of goodwill, sacrifice, even government intervention cannot help the fact that you cannot be competitive. The world out there is full of hungry people who are trying to do this, and the ones who emerge and who are really able to show the results are the ones who have done their homework. And there has not been one single day where I have not learned something new.
So skills as one of the challenges, and Interestingly enough, I think that for some of the data that I read a moment ago about the productivity challenges, skills does stand up as one of those. David, I just want to come back to you quickly on this point around the blockers to continued growth and productivity and challenges. As part of the announcement last week, one of the things the government announced was a £7.4 million AI upskilling fund pilot announced to try and gen up on the AI skills to enable us to accelerate our learning. And I want to come back specifically onto the technology in a few moments' time. But as we start to look to where productivity is struggling, the latest ONS productivity flash data, and it was reflected in your charts as well, says that the finance and insurance industries are making the biggest negative contribution to productivity at the moment. We've always thought of our financial services and so on as being growth sectors in the UK, as being big exports. So what is it that is preventing finance, insurance companies from experiencing that growth? What are their blockers? Is it skills? Is it macroeconomic stuff? What is it?
It may be just a measurement issue. So the problem with finance, insurance and banking, investment banking, is how do you measure it? Most economic data is based on something called gross value added. Yep. So you have your inputs and you have your outputs, and you're trying to show the difference between the two.
Yep.
So the issue in financial services in particular is how do you actually measure that? So there's whole measurement areas. And often when it comes to banking, some of the measured output data relies on interest rate margins and things like that,
yep,
which isn't the way probably if you're running a financial institution you normally think about things. But so it may be partly a function of measurement. It may be still we're living in this world of post-financial crisis where these sectors are going through structural change and getting smaller. Now, quite a lot of people would view that perhaps as a good thing.
Yep.
You could make the case, and I worked in investment banking a very long time. I originally have a STEM degree in mathematics and ended up as an economist, but you could make the case quite strongly that a lot of people with STEM degrees and PhDs ended up in financial services where they should be working in areas like net zero, AI and so forth. So maybe if the sector gets smaller, maybe that's not such a bad thing. If you then get people working, coming out of these wonderful universities that we have, coming out and doing really great stuff. Working on, if there's going to be another pandemic at some point, people working at these universities in these areas. So I don't view that as necessarily a problem. Okay. What I would say as a macroeconomist, there's been a lot of stuff written about this, is the UK suffers from a regional productivity gap, huge productivity gap.
Yeah.
And we all know this. So productivity is measured is much higher here in London and the South East than it is in the rest of the country. So how do you basically get...
how do you level up?
Exactly.
Steering away from party politics, David. Right, okay. Thank you very much indeed. Lessons learned. Obviously, we can learn lessons based on our own country's economic history, and we can also learn from a broader view, other companies, other sectors than our own, but also international views as well. And Liz, you are an international entrepreneur. Your products, your brands have travelled far and wide. Are there any lessons that you've picked up from sectors other than your own, the health, beauty, well-being sectors, that you think could be well applied to your own? Or are there any lessons that you feel, do you know what, they're doing this really well in Asia, for example, or in America, there's in the US, there is this stimulus that's working over there. I wish we had a bit of that over here.
Well, it's interesting, you talk about technology and AI and all of that. I think if you look at the beauty sector, that's something that I'm slightly removed from now, but the place that really springs to mind is Asia. Look at South Korea. That is absolutely storming, and they are so forward-thinking and they're so techie, and they seem to apply it to everything. They even managed to, put it into face cream, the techie stuff. So I think, and it's growing. It has a real name for itself for such a small geographical area. Their global reach is huge. So I think definitely looking at markets like that, which is perhaps not traditionally what you might think of. When people think about beauty, you might think of Europe, you might think of, France or Italy or, somewhere, even the States, which is so vast and so diverse. But actually, I think there are opportunities to create real niche using technology. And it's interesting to see where this whole AI, I know we'll talk about that later, kind of goes with the grants there and how businesses use it, because I think there is a lot of opportunity.
Okay. Same to you, Emma. Again, very focused on food and beverage as you have been, and right now specifically on the beverage side. But is there anything that you're looking upon with jealousy, with yearning elsewhere that you think, I wish we had a bit of that?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So can I just get a show of hands? Is anyone in this room trying to drink more alcohol this year? But what's really interesting is alcohol-free beer in the UK, as a percentage of total beer, it's less than 3%. If you look at our colleagues and our friends in Europe, it's around 17% in Sweden. It's 15% in Spain. And the thing that I look for at Spain is there was a fantastic approach to looking at alcohol-free across the government, the Department of Health, the Department of Business, trade bodies. They all got together and said, right, what are we going to do about this? How can we promote this this wonderful, amazing category, which has benefits for obviously health, and alcohol does cause a huge amount of money needed to be spent in the NHS. But also, as we just saw, show of hands, most people are trying to moderate. So people, you might not, understand this, but there's quite a lot of people now that just don't want to just go to a pub, sit down and drink. And that's why you've got the wonderful rise in things like competitive socialising. So I don't know if anyone's been to Flight Club or Electric Shuffle. You want to do stuff when you go into a venue. You don't want to just sit there and get drunk. So I would love to see our government do that. We are working with the Department of Health. They are looking at alcohol-free and how they can promote it. But really, when you buddy up health and business, that's where the magic happens. So we should be looking at countries like Spain, where it's totally, totally acceptable for two guys to go into a bar, order 2 pints of alcohol-free beer and sit there and have the drink. No social stigma attached to that at all. So there's stuff that we can be looking at.
Okay. Thank you very much. Some really interesting insights there. Social cricket is the latest one that's opened up just around the corner from where I work. I'm very much looking forward to bowling some sixes or something. I don't play cricket, as you can tell. Carlo, lessons, you have an international viewpoint, obviously. Lessons that you're seeing maybe from elsewhere that you think would be great if we could bring them over here?
If you think how key is the combination of evolution of management best practices and adoption of technology, unfortunately, or frankly, I'm a little bit jealous of the fact that we have yet again have to look at the US, and not just because they're becoming the dominant force in the core technology of, tomorrow and anyway already today, but because the barrier to make use of this technology in a very pragmatic way to transform companies is just lower. I feel that in many cases, one of the big barrier, one of the forces against this barrier is skill, competence, and ability to think. But the other one is the inertia of the status quo. And if we don't overcome the inertia of the status quo, sometimes we can't even think how to address it because we don't know. But in order to address it, we need to know, the skill or whatever we want to call it, but also the willingness to act and to transform companies. Companies are not going to increase productivity by staying where they are. They need to change something. And in many cases, technology is one of the components of this change.
Well, I was going to ask on that point, do you see different parts of businesses being more open to change? So technology, the technology function, embracing new technologies like AI or SaaS or moving to the cloud or whatever it is, versus the finance functions. Do you find that finance might be more conservative with a small c to change versus technology or marketing or whatever?
No, I don't think necessarily so. Actually, finance, you were talking about how to measure the productivity of finance. There is in financial services, there is one more variable that doesn't exist in many other industries, and that's regulation. It's very difficult to measure productivity in those sectors without considering the cost of regulation, and that is not going down, is actually dramatically increasing. So if you think how much of whatever you're doing is going to be eaten up by that, whatever remains is significant because you are building on top of something, but that's also an opportunity. If financial services thinks they can address a continuously and monotonically increasing level of regulation just by throwing the same, meaning a bunch of people at it, that's not going to be sustainable. So that's a big opportunity. I believe they will have to do that. Just project. It's already true that for one investment banker, you have like 4 people of compliance around looking at everything they do. Now, what about when there will become 10? It cannot be 10 people. It must be something different.
David, I'll do rugby. I'll do a spin pass to you. And obviously, you've got a background in finance, working in regulated industries, of course. We're talking about the barriers to growth and productivity. And I wonder the extent to which you understand regulation, which you understand to be one of those barriers to that's holding us back.
Well, it's certainly the case of the financial crisis. Whether it's gone too far, I don't know. I take the point entirely about compliance officers, but I can also job back. My father was a government scientist, and he would say in the late 70s, suddenly there were more admin people than actually people doing science. Pure science in the UK, which has also been, slightly put on the back foot. So, we've seen this before in a way, but I think it's obviously now much more costly to do business for a lot of financial-based companies.
I want to come on to other challenges, particularly with regards to changing legislative frameworks or changing tax rules and so on. And we've seen some of that happen. It's certainly affecting smaller and medium businesses. National insurance changing again. But before we do that, Carlo, just one conversation, and maybe this falls into the regulatory piece, I don't know. But in terms of that relationship between the CFO and the CEO, particularly when we're navigating, whether it's regulation, whether it's changing context and so on, how important are you seeing that to ensuring that your business is moving in the right direction? Because it could be that you've got ambitions going in one direction, but finances may be looking in a different direction. How are you getting the sense in your business, I guess you get absolute sense, but elsewhere, that partnership is moving in the right direction, or are you still seeing divisions where there shouldn't be?
No, it's very strange to think of something divided. Business is one thing. And the quantitative side of it is the only way you can rationally look at it and learn anything. So I don't think there is a relationship between the CEO and the CFO. I believe they are two sides of the same coin. It's like I don't know. In advertising, the copywriter and the art director. I mean, there is a couple of things that are not something you can distinguish or separate. They are working together. So you go through the challenges of looking at the world of today and solving the problems, requiring best practices, management evolution, the proper tools, quantitative analysis of everything is the objective truth about the business, need to be a part of it. And you need to use all this in order to go against, and this is out of your comfort zone, the status quo, because if you don't take action, you're not going to be able to evolve and increase your productivity. If you want, we see this every day in all of our companies. We even humbly, as Soldo, try to do the same thing in saying, look, in your company there are 1,000 things you do, but there is one, for example, the way you manage the money and how the money is the fuel for everything that happens in a company, how that thing is made available to everybody on the front line or in the back of the company in order to make things happen. The world tend to react to money, not just to good intentions. So you need money to make money. You need money to move things. How you can take care of that? We look at ourselves, we look at our companies, our clients' companies, and we try to think, is there something there that is a big thing, a big problem, because you are living in a status quo where that thing is not properly managed? Can we help? It's just a very small bit. We adopt it internally. We try to adopt it for our customers. If every company would have somebody helping on one small bit, bringing best practices, bringing a lot of thinking with the only goal of making life better than the status quo, I believe collectively, and we are very much buyer of such things, we would like somebody to come to us and help us optimize one piece. Our job is to go to another company and help them optimize the piece we do as Soldo in our life. This network effect would increase productivity. So I believe this is the thing. And in financial services as well, I believe RegTech is going to be a huge market. We know that thing is needed. We know that thing has to be done. It has to be done more smartly. AI for sure is going to play a significant role in that area. So a lot of opportunities there to build the services industry that we're talking about.
Well, let's come on in a moment to some of the opportunities that AI can bring. But first of all, Emma, I'll come to you. Some of the changes that the government have brought in, kind of legislative tax rules and so on, do you find that national insurance, for example, and Lizzie mentioned VAT a moment ago as well, do you find that these initiatives have simplified things for you? Have they made things better, or are they making things more complicated when it comes to, running a company?
It's really interesting. So I'm sure most people in the room will be pleased to know that they froze the duty on alcohol. Obviously, that doesn't affect us. It mostly affects manufacturers. It does not affect the hospitality industry at all. The hospitality industry all came together before the budget and proposed they wanted a reduction in VAT rate of 12.5%. I think we all knew that it wouldn't happen. But as I said, a lot of hospitality businesses in the UK, 2/3 of them need some form of fiscal intervention.
Yeah.
Does it affect us? No. We just keep going. And I have to say, I'll speak with two hats on. One is with this wonderful group of family business and independents. They're trying to keep their business alive. They don't really have time to look at the stuff that's coming through. Normally, wife is front of house, husband's the head chef. One of them said to me, Emma, I need a pot washer for Saturday night. I'm not really looking at what's happening.
Yeah.
With my Lucky Saint head on, we just keep going. Ambition is to be the world's defining alcohol-free brand. We won't be the biggest. Heineken's going to do a brilliant job at that. And our purpose is to inspire the world to drink better. I'm very fortunate. When I joined the business 6 weeks before lockdown, as you can imagine was fun, when we lost 80% of our revenue overnight and then pivoted very quickly to D2C model, we were 5. We're now 70. That's where the change comes, is growing a business from 5 to 70, which may not sound huge to many people, but that's 1,300% growth in people. That's where we put all our effort. And I must talk about skills really briefly.
Please do.
We are huge proponents of a growth mindset. Does everyone know what a growth mindset is in this room? Constantly challenging ourselves, constantly upskilling ourselves. Even as a beer producer, we're looking at AI, which I know we'll come to talk to. We put our P&L in front of the whole team on a monthly basis, right down to EBITDA. Unlike many businesses, we are a B Corp, so we're completely open about what we do. And that is the way we're going to improve productivity, I think, in the workplace, is every single person understanding what I call the levers of a P&L. So everyone in the business, my ambition for anyone that joins Lucky Saint, in 2 years' time, if they walked into a VC or a PE, they could present a business case and they could raise finance. That's my ambition as a leader, because they understand how to run the business. My full senior team, my ELT, enabling leadership team, understand every single element. So if we need to think about cutting costs, marketing director might put her hand up and say, actually, do you know what? I can put that on hold for 6 months. My supply and operations director says, it's okay, I've negotiated COGS, cost of goods. We're going, we've got 2% off here.
Yeah.
We'll look at headcount. We'll say, actually, we don't need that higher until, next year. And we work the P&L as a team. And that's how I think we're going to improve productivity, is if people really deeply understand how to run a business.
That gets more challenging. You spoke about the growth that you've been on in the 4 years. You must be almost 4 years to the week since you joined. The growth journey that you've been on since then, the larger the company, the more difficult that becomes. That's probably a conversation for another day. But thank you very much. Liz, I guess same question to you. I've been on your website a few days ago and saw the size of your team there, much smaller, but still very engaged. And there's still a team that it's still a staff. It's still a brand that you're bringing to market. Are the changes that are being announced, are they something that you feel are helping you? Is it hindering you? Are you able to take those on board and look to the future? Or is it really, as Emma mentioned, sometimes it's about the here and now and finding a pot washer for a Saturday night?
I think you've summed it up so well. It really is about the here and now. And I think if you talk to any brand founder particularly, you're so embedded and focused on what we're doing right now. There is not a huge amount of leeway to look outside of that, and unless there is an earth-shattering change, and I don't think this budget has presented that at all. Actually, the 1%, 2% here and there, the finance team will just take care of that. They'll just adjust the VAT return. They'll just adjust the NIC contributions. It's not a business imperative. And we don't have the luxury, because we are a small team, even smaller than you at the moment with my publishing business, is to give ourselves the time to look outside of that, because everybody is working really hard to do what they do. I so admire your business ethic there. I think it's amazing. But, you're right. Actually, something that you mentioned earlier, there was managing change, because that is the hardest thing. So, but I don't actually see in this budget an enormous amount of change, if I'm really honest.
Okay. David, we're talking about government support here in the ways in which it is or isn't, frankly, helping some businesses at the moment. It's easy to focus on the announcements. Great. Alan Turing Institute gets £1 million for AI and so on, and levies being cut or frozen in other areas. What's missing? What wasn't mentioned? Are there any losers or any markets or sectors that might feel left out in this budget?
So one thing that hasn't been mentioned so far, which is something they announced obviously last year, which has taken effect this year, which actually the Bank of England is thinking about, is the impact of the national minimum wage and national living wage.
Yep.
Particularly areas like hospitality. And that rises coming through, are actually significant at the lower end of the income distribution. And how much impact will that have, basically going up the income chain? Now, they've obviously done it for very good reason, but I don't know what impact that will have. Now, it doesn't seem to be having an impact in terms of employment expectations, but just in terms of keeping wage inflation higher for longer. And what we've seen in the labour market stats is this catch-up where we came out of furlough and you had this big rise in income in areas like financial services, which were benefiting also from the impacts of QE and so forth. But also in business services, professional, technical services, all those sorts of areas are doing really well. And the hospitality sector and the arts sector were really left behind. What was incredible to me as an economist, we can drill down, because one thing that happened in COVID is the ONS statisticians went away and they got their spreadsheets, and we have now much more granular data than we ever had before. So you can drill it down by region, by sector, and you could see that areas like arts, hospitality, all those areas had massive vacancy issues. But actually pay rises were really, really low. Now we've got a situation where they were starting to catch up, albeit from very low levels. And then you've got the impacts of the national minimum wage and living wage. So I'm just interested in that because, whether that has a knock-on effect through the income distribution, not so much on employment, but on other things. The other thing, obviously, they didn't address and needs to be addressed is just a big picture. Where are we going to go as an economy? As I said, there's this obsession with this fiscal headroom, which is the very small difference between two very large numbers. I mean, £10 billion may sound like a big number, but actually in the size of the economy, given the tax take, given the public spending plans, very small, number, balancing item. There's so much obsession about that and not about where we go in terms of enhancing productivity, which comes back to AI, comes back to positioning ourselves for net zero. And also this interesting mix that we're seeing a lot of inward migration and a lot of employment gains. And, this again is very different to what people expected. We were hoping to move into a high-tech world with more investment and maybe higher wages. This is not where wages have gone up, but investment hasn't really. So, it's very interesting.
Okay, well, let's bring in the technology conversation and on the role that technology could play within organizations to enable further growth. AI, of course, is not out of is in pretty much every conversation. I go to my corner shop and I'm in a conversation about AI. True story every time. AI, a number of measures, a number of conversations about it, but just linking AI to the productivity conversation, KPMG and University of Cambridge come up with a report into the value of generative AI to the UK labour market. Not talking about job displacement, that's something else, but just in terms of AI businesses, AI could add 1.2%, I think that's percentage points, to the level of UK productivity in terms of 2022 level GDP. If we're talking about our growth being quite low, adding a percentage point onto GDP through AI businesses in the UK, of which there are more than 3,000 of them according to the SIC codes at the moment, is potentially huge. And that doesn't speak to the ripple-on benefits of one of these AI companies providing a platform that enable businesses like yours in order to do what they do a little bit better as well. So my question to you, and Liz, I'll come to you first of all on this. We're talking a lot about AI and the amazing things, sometimes intangible things, that AI is supposed to be able to do for us. With your operation at the moment, how do you see AI? Do you see it as being able to support what you do to enable you to operate more efficiently or more at scale in the short term or in the medium term?
Potentially. I don't see the immediate benefit, if I'm really honest, in the short term. I'm yet to be convinced in the medium and longer term. I have to say that as a publisher and as a writer, I'm very concerned about issues like copyright. Yep. And, I have a new book deadline coming up. I was very tempted to key the whole thing into ChatGPT and see if it would write it for me. But, who is going to own that material? I think there are huge, huge questions. And I think, we seem to be leaping into the great unknown before we sort out a few fundamentals, potentially.
Pandora's box has very much been opened in the budget. We spoke about the UK becoming the next Silicon Valley. Having been around the block a few times, that's not the first time that rhetoric has come out, it's fair to say. And on investment in AI, OpenAI, one of the big brands behind generative AI at the moment, came out with Sora a few weeks ago, which is this video generation tool. Really interesting, got a lot of headlines. LinkedIn doesn't get too fruity for me, but when I posted a link to that, I had to moderate the comments on it because from TV producers getting very excited about the capabilities that it brings to journalists getting so concerned, to your point about the IP, about the ownership of that content, it's a very divisive topic. A lot of investment went into film and TV production in the budget announcement, yet we're also seeing in the United States high-level producers now seeing tools like Sora, seeing generative AI tools and saying, we're not going to invest in bricks and mortar TV studios anymore, or at least for the moment, because we think it's going to be replaced by AI or heavily impacted by AI. So there's some really big implications. We don't quite know how they're going to rattle out. Emma, where do you sit in terms of the opportunities that AI might be able to bring to your operation?
Yeah, it's interesting actually. In our ELT meeting last week, we went around the table and to see who's using it. And actually, our marketing department are using it all the time. They're really excited about it. We've obviously got quite a lot of young people that work at Lucky Saint. They're super entrepreneurial. They're finding ways to use it. It is reducing time to do things. I don't know if has anyone seen our None campaign out at the moment. So we just launched an IPA back in December. And if anyone saw the launch of that, the hands that were generated, that was all AI. So we're actually using it quite a lot. There is a concern, though, with the tools that are out there at the moment, as Liz said, is you put your information in, then it's gone. A competitor could go and find that information, and we don't all have the capability of Bloomberg to build our own AI tools. So there is a concern there. Should the government be doing more? I think we're looking for some sort of authority to give us some guidance on it. It's probably laughable to think they're going to provide training given how quickly it's moving. But I think we are looking for it. But I must stress, if we want to attract world-class talent in tech and everyone gets so excited about tech, just remember, they want to be able to walk out, they want to be able to have a nice coffee, they want to have a nice lunch, they want to go to the theatre in the evening. So we have to support other industries as well. Everyone runs away getting super excited about sexy tech, but let's make sure we look after our high streets as well.
Yes, absolutely. Klarna, buy now, pay later company, recently put out a press release about the benefit of their OpenAI-powered chatbot, which said, my takeaway from this, it helped them to resolve customer queries more than 5 times faster, more accurately than the human agents, with the customer satisfaction scores on par with human agents, doing the work of 700 agents. That got a lot of headlines over the last couple of weeks about that tangible benefit. They don't talk about the actual cost. They talk about a potential contributing to a $40 million profit in 2024, but they don't talk about the actual cost of implementing that. But it's still quite interesting to make some of this stuff tangible. Carlo, AI, what are you going to use it for? Got any plans?
Yeah, many. But I believe the interesting thing, well, in addition to our own internal use, that like any company, it touches many things, some immediately available now, images, marketing, copywriting, of course, customer support is almost a natural thing. The real thing is, for most companies, once you have exhausted these readily available use cases that reflect our incredible reaction to something that just emerged out of nothing.
Yep.
Just forget, we shouldn't forget this thing has been going on for 40 years.
We're very much naive now.
We have intersected Moore's law. That's why now that's the thing that has changed everything has been the availability of, let's say, almost infinite computing power for once being thrown at this thing, only to discover that it works.
Yep.
Only with incredible amount of computing power. So it has emerged. We are all trying to make sense of it. The key thing is, in most companies, it's not about the core AI technology, the models. There will be a race. Who's going to be tier 1 model, OpenAI, the leader in how much money I spend in computing power to discover whatever is next, all the way to, I believe there are already now hundreds of models, all the way to open source models that can run on much more modest resources. That is the sort of the core building blocks of technology, and that's a race. Leave it aside. All those things need to be applied. The question is, when all these things need to be applied inside companies, who's going to be the bridge? Who's going to bring this thing into companies? That means adapting it to the context, to the specific content, keeping the content private because I don't want to be sucked in the public, let's say, AI cloud, because that thing is mine. I want it to be used in my environment and not leaked out. If you think of it, from the core technologies we are all looking at to the actual deployment inside companies, there is an entire industry that is to be created. Probably there is no way, say the UK, can really compete at the core model. That thing is not a race that will be meaningfully addressed, even though the UK is DeepMind is one of the jewels in the world for this thing, but generative has gone one step further is not the place, but still, in order to realize that level of productivity increase that AI can bring, you need an industry of people saying, oh, here we have technology that can be used. There you have a company with their own, let's call it again, status quo of things. Now, which one of those things can be dramatically improved by that? And who's going to be responsible for credibly thinking what the deployment should be?
Yep.
I hear a lot of, I remember I was in a Goldman Sachs conference a few months ago, and everybody saying, oh, if you are not spending money on AI, you're already losing the game. Oh, wait a second, this is a very good marketing pitch for people selling this thing, but money spent for what? It will take some time to adapt it. I believe what could be the opportunities to create the industry that will make sense of those tools and adapt it and adopt it inside technologies in the proper way, focusing on creating ROI.
The implementation, the technology.
If the ROI exists, productivity will increase. This thing will be adopted and used and become a tool for good.
Yep.
Otherwise, we will pay taxes to the big models, either in the form of stolen intellectual property, or one more thing that we become user of, but not participant in the creation of.
And that massive centralization of power around AI models is one of the three big concerns, along with trust and truth. But that, again, that's a conversation for another time. Two final very quick points on AI. A lot of concern about job displacement. A report from KPMG, again, 40% of UK jobs could see some impact from generative AI, with 2.5% of tasks affected. However, around half of the labour market displacement will be offset by the creation of new tasks linked to managing the technology within those effective jobs. So as we've seen already with technology cycles over the last 20, 25 or so years, automation, brilliant, those jobs maybe are gone, but quite a few of those jobs there are new jobs being created to support that. KPMG thinks about 50% of those. Let's come on to takeaways, and I'm just going to go down the panel very quickly, really, just to get some really takeaway thoughts. I'll come to you first of all, Emma, this time. If there was one piece of advice that you would like to share with business leaders, either here today or let's say you were in front of your businesses, your sometimes much smaller businesses that you are representing and speaking to a lot, to help make sense of the budget and help make a positive move from it, if you see one in there, what would that piece of advice be?
I think because I've just become into this world in the last few months, the power of the collective. So the collective being, the FBI group that I'm a chair of, very proud chair of on the Hospitality Sector Council. Hospitality Sector Council even didn't exist before COVID. Can you believe? Hospitality wasn't in a minister's job description. It now is. Wow. Minister Kevin Hollenrake, who is the Minister for Business, also the Post Office, so he's quite busy. And also I've just been asked to join the Small Business Council that's just been set up by the government. And I can tell you there's 20 entrepreneurial leaders in that room, all gunning to make a change. We're going to look at 3 different things: skills, removing barriers and access to finance. And we're all chomping at the bit to make a change. So the power of the collective, bringing people together that want to make a change.
Super stuff. Thank you very much indeed. Liz, same question to you. What are your takeaways from what we've been discussing about what's been happening over the last 3 or 4 months in terms of fiscal events and budgets? What would your takeaway and advice be to enable growth, to enable change, to enable some growth in productivity?
I think, very much more of the same of what Emma has said, that we are stronger together. I think the government really needs to focus on the small business. As I say, there needs to be a lot of support because that is where the growth is for the future. I know that the government aren't potentially always hugely good at long-term planning, but, when you're looking at building businesses 10, 20, 30 years out, we really need that support. I love the collective, and I think, we are there are so many different areas that need to be joined up. You were talking about how health needs to connect with hospitality. It's the same when you look at food. We need to get the health department talking to the justice department, talking, how do we keep people out of prisons, for example, by feeding people better so their behaviour is better. I mean, there are these much wider conversations that need to happen. And I think a lot of it does start with these smaller ground roots organisations that can have benefit for society as well as building businesses for the longer term as well.
When you look at the makeup of employment across the UK, the skew towards smaller businesses making up a huge proportion of a large portion of overall employment.
I'm very sceptical about these AI employment claims. You just say yourself about Klarna saying that they've managed to, or sort of gleefully report that they're down 700 phone operators. Well, that's 700 family lives impacted. I don't feel that's a positive.
Well, I think they would say that it's enabled them to answer more calls in a much shorter space of time.
Overall, I think, business needs to take a much more broader look within its role within society and not just be profit-focused.
Yeah. So strength in numbers, not just be profit-focused. Thank you. Carlo, very briefly?
Well, very briefly, I'm going to look, I am a half-empty glass kind of person, but...
I'll drink to that.
Well, given that David said, things are not as bad, let's look at a half full. It need to be on a micro environment, not macro, so a little tactical rather than strategic. The big question will have to be answered later on this year or whatever is the big upheaval and the government reshuffle that possibly can or not happen. But on the micro, I would say, anything that brings money into the pocket of our people, that's good. Our own, people working, get a little bit more money, that's good, because it's our responsibility to do that. In this case, a little bit is coming from the government, the rest from the expected wage. The part that doesn't get into the money, into the pockets of our own people, gets into the pocket of the broader community that will lead to consumption, that will help companies. We sell to companies, that's indirectly good as well. What is going to be the cost of it? Are you going to get 900 on average as more money?
Oh, yeah.
And then your kindergarten cost will go up 50%. Probably doesn't balance out. It's like the nice you're re-employing half of the people displaced through AI, but you're still displaced.
Sure.
The other half. But I would say better this than some measure that could have benefited only larger company. This is it's very small because it's very wide, but at least is going into the wider economy, because the real thing is cost of living, disposable income, wage increase. The benefit to big companies or to companies with the full expensing we saw in the last fiscal event would have ultimately possibly percolated down into the real economy in due time. This is more direct, very small.
Very, very quick, one sentence, final thought on key takeaway for you.
Well, I'm looking forward to the March 2025 budget. And I hope that actually frames the big picture. We get away from this obsession with tiny fiscal headroom, and we talk about the big stuff and the stuff that we all needs addressing for the UK, and not to be so pessimistic about the UK.
Yeah, optimism. Thank you very much indeed. Final point on the screen. Did the spring budget announcements provide enough support for your business growth? 92% of you are saying no. So I'm surmising from that, and that is the same result as at the beginning. So either you all had a perfectly realistic view of the economy and of the prospects and of what the opportunities were for growth given the budgetary announcements, and we've really reiterated those over the last hour or so. Who knows? Come spring next year, we may have had one, maybe two fiscal events. Who knows by then? Maybe whoever is in power come this time next year may pull another rabbit out of a hat, or another big shock, as you announced, as you mentioned earlier on, with Gordon Brown 25 or so years ago. Let's see. But for now, thank you very much indeed for your analysis, your real-world application of that analysis as well. Please give it up for our panel, for David, for Liz, for Emma, and for Carlo. That is all from the CFO Playbook podcast today. We'll be back on the final Thursday of every month, including our next episode, which is an interview with Richard Dana, CEO and co-founder of Timber Money. See you there.